Thank you very much, Markus, for the introduction, and thank you for the invitation to come and speak here today. Hope everyone is doing well wherever you might be located. I'll try to be brief. I'll try to be fast. Usually when I talk about this, I have at least 90 minutes to 2 hours, and this topic spans about 1.5 years of studies at our university. So I might get carried away, but I'll try to keep it within 10 to 15 minutes, and there will be a short time for questions afterwards. If you have any questions regarding anything that I'm presenting now, you can, of course, write them in the chat, and I'll try to answer them at the end of the presentation. So, just a few words about who I am. As Markus already introduced, I work as a university teacher currently at the University of Turku, which is one of the main universities in Finland. We're ranked actually very well in international rankings also. My main post is in digital learning and teaching, and I also teach a course in what we call the Artificial Intelligence Academy, where we look at the effects of AI on different parts of society. I work as an educational technologist, so we focus on the digital pedagogies at our university and in general in teacher education. I wrote there also a general nerd, because I think to be well knowledgeable about these topics, you need to be also interested in the technology, even though technology is not the center focus of what I'm talking about today. And then I also work with in-service teachers, so teachers in Finland who want to come and specialize in using digital technologies in their work can come and do so at our university. But the topic of today is not what I do at my current job, it's digital technologies. And I wanted to start with this picture that I'm sure most of you have at some point seen if you've attended any kind of speech or talk or webinar regarding this topic. This is a prediction from a French artist about what school would look like in the year 2000. It is made in the very late 19th century, and as we can see, the idea was that a professor is dropping books into a machine that we grind, and information magically appears into the heads of the students at school. And while we all know that this definitely did not end up happening, this is not what school looks like today, I think it's a good picture to still look at today when we talk about technology, because it sort of exemplifies how we have all kinds of maybe false presumptions about what technology can provide us in school. And I'll try to cover a few of those today. And also, because I'm a big proponent of using technology in school, using technology in education, but I think it's important that we focus on the real benefits of using these technologies instead of some kinds of false hopes of what we want them to provide us, even though the research might not back those things up very well. So 2 very important things that I feel are always important to remember when we talk about technology use in education. I always start with technology does not replace the teacher. Now, this does not mean in any way that technology cannot do some of the jobs that the teacher does now. It does not mean that the technology cannot help the teacher. On the contrary, technology very much can help the teacher. Technology very much can take care of some of the things the teacher does, for example, in regards to assessment or in regards to lesson planning, etc. But introducing technology into the classroom does not take the teacher out of the equation. And I think that's always very important to remember, especially if we're looking at this from a broader perspective of not an individual teacher, but from a school system perspective, etc. We still need skilled teachers in the classroom. Technology can provide them with very good tools to help them succeed at their job. And I'll give a few examples of how that usually happens. And to that end, technology use should always be approached from a pedagogical perspective. When we introduce technologies into the classroom, when we think about how we want to use some kind of technology within a classroom setting, we should always think about the pedagogical perspective of the situation. Always think about what kind of benefits, what kind of added value that technology will bring to both teaching and, more importantly, learning of the students. So always keep these things in mind when we think about using technology. Sometimes we tend to get carried away by seeing very exciting new technologies that, oh, I can't wait until this is introduced into the classroom. But then we always need to keep in mind that at the end of the day, the important thing is how we learn and how we can support that learning and how we can use these technologies to support that learning. Some key takeaways, and due to only speaking to you for 15 minutes, these are very brief, small parts from different research papers about what we know in general about using technology in a classroom setting. So in general, when we're looking at a lot of studies, technology seems to be more successful as a supplement instead of a replacement. And this is what I was already speaking about in the previous slide, is we supplement what we do in the classroom. We support, we add on to, we bring added value to the things that are already working and things we do very well. Of course, we can use technology to benefit us in the areas that we have difficulties in also, but it's more of a supplement than a replacement. And when we look at studies on longer perspectives, these seem to be the times when we see most benefit out of technology use. So instead of trying to replace something that we do in the classroom, we supplement what we already do. To that end, technology can be a great catalyst for change. So introducing technology into the classroom can help us understand better what is happening in regards to learning, what is happening in regards to students maybe failing some classes, students being frustrated from the lack of challenge, etc. And to that end, technology can work as a catalyst for added change in the classroom because it can help us understand better what's happening in the classroom. And learning analytics, for example, is a great example of this. And the general takeaway, and this is from a 2012 summary of how EdTech was being looked at to be introduced in the classroom, is the big question that we pose is how can we use technology for improvement as well as more effective and efficient teaching and learning practices? So how can we use these technologies to actually help us with what we're trying to do in the classroom? Some other findings that we can take away from, once again, looking at the general use of technology. I'm not looking at any specific using some certain technology in some certain subject, but more in general of what educational technology used in the classroom actually means, also from a research perspective, is that we tend to see that when we look at large masses of students, that technology seems to be of benefit to student achievement. Sometimes you'll see arguments that technology takes away from the time that the teachers actually have to teach, or it might be detrimental to what we do in the classroom. While this can sometimes be true, most likely it's a case of not using the technology to its fullest potential and not actually understanding what we want to do with the technology in the classroom. So just dropping technology into a classroom setting without any planning, without any idea of what we try to achieve by doing that, we might not get positive effects. We might end up with both teachers and students being confused at what are we supposed to do with this new technology. But when it's well planned, when it's used by the teachers who understand what they're doing with this technology, it tends to have a benefit to student achievements. And also we see that the moderate use of technology seems to outweigh technology applications that feature all of the bells and whistles, so to speak. So instead of trying to solve every possible problem that we see or every possible thing that we want to do in the classroom using technology, we tend to get more benefit from using technology in a moderate fashion. So once again, instead of replacing all of the good things that are already happening in the classroom, we use it as a beneficial tool to help with the things that we want to achieve. And one of the biggest takeaways from this paper was that the most essential thing shared by most of these large research papers that are looked at in this one larger paper is the importance of various pedagogical aspects of technology use. So using technology in various different ways, approaching it always from a pedagogical aspect, like I already said in the beginning, this is one of the key things that we need to keep in mind when we use technology. So all of this goes to say that the question no longer should be whether teachers use EdTech or not. This is I guess an argument or a discussion that's been ongoing for actually almost longer than I've been alive. There are professors in my university, actually now retired, who have been studying EdTech to some extent already starting in the 70s. So the idea in 2021 is not whether we use educational technology or not. It's that shouldn't be the argument. The argument should be how can we best incorporate various different educational technology applications into the classroom settings. And looking at the list of the companies that will be speaking to you today, I can see from that there are various different applications for using EdTech for various different things in the classroom. So I think you will have a very interesting discussion to that end of how you can utilize these different technologies to best suit the classroom. I think a good way to sort of close up the part of what we know from the past of EdTech very shortly is, this is a quote that many of you are probably familiar with from a Norwegian, Kristen Lang. If I remember correctly, it's from his acceptance speech for a Nobel Prize, I think. And he quotes or says that technology is a useful servant but a dangerous master, which I think it's quite often thrown around when we talk about technology. I think this is a little bit too dramatic when we talk about EdTech from a school context, and I would rather change it a little bit to technology is a great servant but a bad master, in the sense that when we use technology to its fullest potential in the classroom, we can make great things happen. We can have great benefits from using technology within the classroom setting. But if we try to change everything that we do in the classroom to suit that technology, so we take away what our teachers do, what their years of being in the classroom helps them understand, and we try to make that suit the technology at hand, then we might be going in the wrong direction. So technology is a tool, and we should use that tool to the benefit of the teachers instead of making the teachers change what they're doing just to suit some special technology. And we need these teachers to implement technologies in the classroom to support teaching and learning. So I think that's about halfway of the time. And for the other half, so we have a few minutes for questions. I'll try to take a very brief look into the crystal ball of what does the future of EdTech actually look like. And I'm not proposing that I have the answers of what's going to happen in 5 or 10 years. Of course I don't, because it's trying to predict the future. But I took a few takeaways from a few different groups of researchers, a few different groups of EdTech innovators, looking at what are the main things that we need to look at when we talk about EdTech now and in the future. This is from an American group of, or COSN is a group that takes EdTech innovators in schools and tries to make them meet in the middle and talk about what we need to do in schools to make EdTech innovations viable in the school context. And the top 3 hurdles that they see for now and in the future are things like digital equity. Do all the students have access to these digital tools? Are different schools in different areas in very different situations? And this is a big thing that we need to solve on a global scale if we want to talk about using digital tools in education. Is, of course, people need to have access to these technologies, starting with the internet and starting with some kind of a tool to use these environments as a part of their learning. Scaling, sustaining innovation, and evolution of teaching and learning are other hurdles that they talk about that we need to take care of. But the top 3 accelerators for the latest report are personalization of learning. So using or being able to personalize the things that you're trying to learn, the subject matter or the materials that you're using. Social and emotional learning is a big topic also. So we talk about learning these types of skills that are associated with social emotional learning, like empathy, decision making, self-esteem, motivation, etc. And then learner autonomy. I think this is something that we've all seen through COVID and remote teaching, that learner autonomy is something that also accelerates a lot of the topics. A big key thing behind all of these topics, at least I feel it's a big key topic, and also as one of the big things for key technologies and practices when we look at EdTech this is from a higher education perspective, is data. And with data comes learning analytics, comes artificial intelligence, comes things like this. So we need to know what's happening in the classroom. We need to know what our students are doing. We need to have an understanding of what they're doing when they're learning. How can we use that data for better assessment? How can we use that data to help them learn better in the future, or provide them with support that they need? These are some of the topics that are seen as key technologies and practices that will be driving EdTech adaptation in higher education, for example, but a lot of them also apply to primary education. And then lastly, from the past 5 years, the biggest research points in EdTech research. We talk about data-driven smart educational technology. We talk about big data and learning analytics. So once again, it comes down to using the information that we gain from our students working in the classroom and with these technologies, and using that to maximum benefit to understand better how they're learning. And we approach the last subject of, does that mean we're using artificial intelligence in the classroom? Artificial intelligence is often understood as something from sci-fi movies where we have robots that feel and speak to us, and our technology is not there yet. We don't have that kind of AI to use in the classroom. What we do have, however, in the form of AI is being able to look at data using tools that are considered forms of AI and understanding that data better than any single person could by looking at the same data. So trying to find different connections within that data and better understanding how our students are performing, but also how our teachers are performing for the teacher and for school leaders, whoever might be interested in that data. And I think my time is quickly coming to a close, so I'll end it with a quote from a paper that we wrote with a few professors from the technology field, together with my colleague, where we looked at the ways of using AI in education. And we ended with a conclusion that the future of education is AI assisted, not AI led. And I think this brings me back to the very first point I was making in this presentation is it doesn't really matter what technology we're talking about when we talk about EdTech. Usually it will work as a good assistant to the teacher, but it will not lead what we do in the classroom. That's something we still need teachers for. So the future is not AI assisted, is AI assisted, not AI led. I think we could continue to say that the future of education is EdTech assisted, but not EdTech led also. So that was the very, very brief look at how I look at EdTech from a university teacher perspective, from an academic perspective, and what I see as some of the big things coming up in the future of EdTech. I think at this time, if we have anyone with questions, there's just a minute or two. You can, of course, ask them by your microphone, or you can put them in the chat if you have questions for me. If not, then I think I'll give the floor to the other presenters that we have today.